On Christmas morning, my family gave me a mirror with failure painted on it. "It's symbolic," my cousin said with a smirk. I held back tears. "You'll understand one day," my father added. On New Year's Day, a stranger arrived with a box I never expected. Me, what the heck is this supposed to mean? Mirabelle laughs, "It's symbolic." Dad, without even looking up, "You'll understand one day." Me, "I understand enough." Christmas morning, my family gave me a mirror with failure painted across it. On New Year's Day, a stranger showed up at my door with a wooden box. Inside were letters that revealed I'm not who I thought I was. My parents aren't my parents. The woman I was told died when I was a baby was my real mother. And the man who raised me only took me in out of guilt and pressure. Now I'm left untangling everything. Still in shock. Still trying to figure out what to do next. I never used to think of my family as cruel. Cold, yes. Traditional, sure. Passive-aggressive to the point of weaponization? Absolutely. But not cruel. At least, not in the way you imagine cruelty. Not in the loud, angry, broken glass kind of way. Ours was more curated. Elegant in its punishment. And I played my part for years. My name is Delia. I'm 42, and this past holiday season cracked me wide open. I hadn't been back to the family estate in Lenox in nearly 3 years. The last time I visited, I left early after a particularly tense conversation about my life choices with my father. They always said that with such disdain, choices, as if the very concept of independence was a character flaw. I was the one who didn't get married until later. The one who got divorced 2 years ago after realizing my marriage to a good man lacked love. The one who never had kids, despite years of subtle jabs about my biological clock. I was also the one who left a solid teaching career to prioritize my mental health. In their eyes, I was a living disappointment. So when I got the invitation to come home for Christmas, part of me hoped the tone had changed. My brother Jasper had just welcomed his second daughter, and I thought maybe, just maybe, family priorities were shifting. The house looked exactly the same when I arrived, stone facade, frosted windows, and the front garden lit up in that overly symmetrical way my mother loved. Inside, the scent of pine and clove clung to every surface. I stayed in my old bedroom, unchanged since the 90s. I slept beneath posters of ballets I never finished and books I'd pretended to love just to impress my father. Christmas morning came with coffee, croissants, and stiff small talk. Jasper, of course, got a Rolex. Mirabelle, my cousin, got designer jewelry. When it was my turn, everyone fell silent. A large box. Gilded wrapping. Too fancy to be harmless. I peeled it open slowly. Inside was an antique mirror, oval, brass-framed, with failure painted across the glass in deep red strokes. I stared at it. Waiting for someone to laugh. Waiting for the punchline. None came. Mirabelle leaned in, her mouth curled into a satisfied smirk. "It's symbolic," she said, as if that somehow softened the blow. My father, still seated, still sipping espresso, didn't even look my way. "You'll understand one day." I said nothing. Not because I didn't have words, I had too many. None of them would have made a dent in that room. I took the mirror upstairs. Stared at it for an hour. The worst part? It didn't even shock me. It just confirmed what I already suspected, that I had been labeled, judged, boxed, and discarded long ago. My mother, or the woman I thought was my mother, offered no comfort. Just a glance and a shrug when I passed her in the hallway. The next day, I packed up and left early. Drove back to Worcester in silence. Snow falling like ashes around me. New Year's Day was gray and uneventful. I woke up late, brewed stale coffee, and tried to not think about that mirror. I was still in my robe when I heard a knock on the door. At first, I ignored it. Then it came again. Reluctantly, I opened it. A man stood there. Older, probably mid-60s. Wool coat, scarf, leather gloves. polite, almost solemn. "Are you Delia Walsh?" he asked. I nodded. He handed me a wooden box, heavy, weathered, carved with delicate floral patterns. There was a brass plate on top that read, "For when the mirror breaks." "I was told to deliver this to you today," he said. "Only today." "By who?" "I'm afraid I can't say." I took it. He tipped his hat. "Happy New Year, Ms. Walsh." I brought it inside and placed it on my kitchen table. I stared at it for a while before opening it. I wasn't sure I was ready. Inside were dozens of envelopes, aged and delicate. Handwritten letters. All addressed to my father, Aldrich Walsh, from someone named Eleanor Rhodes. I'd never heard the name before. I read the first one. Then the second. Then I stopped breathing. Eleanor had been in love with my father. They were engaged. She was pregnant with his child. My father's family, powerful and image-obsessed, gave him a choice: leave her and keep his inheritance, or marry her and be cut off. He chose money. She raised the child on her own until she died in a car accident 4 years later. And the child, me, was taken in by Aldrich and Roseanne under the guise of adoption. Quiet. Secretive. They renamed me. Rebranded me. They built an entire story around who I was. Who I wasn't. One of the letters had my original birth certificate folded inside. Not from the hospital, I was told. Not even in the same city. My name wasn't Delia Walsh. It was Eleanor Rhodes Jr., and just like that, everything I thought I knew about my life collapsed. I've stopped here for now because I honestly don't know how to keep writing. I'm sitting in my kitchen, surrounded by letters that prove I was a lie. I don't know who sent the box. I don't know how they knew when to send it. But someone wanted me to know the truth. And now I do. I haven't confronted my father yet. I haven't spoken to Jasper or Mirabelle since I sent them copies of the letters and the certificate. I just needed them to see it. No message. No explanation. Just the truth, raw and unfiltered. I don't know what comes next. Should I reach out to them? Should I go no contact? Should I dig into who Eleanor really was, my real mother, and find anyone who knew her? I feel like I've been living a stranger's life for 42 years. After reading through the first dozen letters, I couldn't sleep. It was the sort of insomnia that doesn't feel like your mind is racing. It feels like your soul is pacing back and forth across the room, trying to find a door that doesn't exist. I kept thinking about the handwriting. It was so elegant. Fluid, even when Eleanor was clearly angry or grieving. You could see emotion in the shape of the letters. I imagined her, at a kitchen table like mine, writing under lamplight, pausing every so often to cry or to fight the instinct to throw the pen across the room. Most of the letters had been returned to her. Unopened. She'd written "Return to sender" on some, others were postmarked but never opened. My father never read them. He kept them in the box like trophies or secrets. I don't know which is worse. Somehow, that wooden box made it to me. No note. No explanation. Just time-released pain, 42 years in the making. On the third day, I found the photo. Tucked between two letters dated a month apart, it was of a young woman in a pale yellow sundress, standing in a field, holding a toddler. The woman had a wide smile. The little girl was holding a dandelion. Her hair was wild. She looked like me. I stared at the picture for nearly an hour. Then I walked outside and threw up in the snow. The weirdest part about identity crisis is that it creeps into the mundane. Grocery shopping felt foreign. I stood in front of the cereal aisle and stared at the boxes like I was reading ancient symbols. I couldn't remember what I usually bought. Or why I liked the things I liked. Was I raised into liking them? Did Roseanne mold me into someone that didn't actually exist? My therapist, yes, I started seeing someone again, called it disassociation through emotional collapse. All I know is, I'd walk past a mirror and not recognize myself for days. I didn't respond to any of the messages from Mirabelle. She texted once after I sent the copies. Just 2 words, "You okay?" It felt hollow. Maybe not malicious, but definitely not sincere. That woman laughed while I opened a mirror painted with failure on it. I wasn't ready to give her any piece of my truth. Jasper called once. Left a voicemail. "Delia, I don't know what to say. It's insane. I think you should talk to Dad before jumping to conclusions." I didn't call back. Because I wasn't jumping. I'd landed hard. By the second week of January, I stopped going out. I ordered groceries. Turned down all tutoring requests. I just needed time. Not to wallow, to think. Because once the initial tidal wave passed, I started seeing things clearly. Why had I always felt tolerated instead of loved? It was in the details. Family dinners where my ideas were ignored. School plays where everyone else's accomplishments were celebrated but mine were expected. Every compliment I got was followed by a reminder of how I could do more. Every misstep became a family anecdote. When I was 17 and got into Brown but chose Mount Holyoke instead, my father told a table of guests it was a charming decision for someone not interested in ambition. Roseanne called it quaint. Jasper told me I was wasting Ivy League potential. They didn't raise me. They shaped me into a symbol. A stand-in. An obligation. 3 weeks after the box arrived, I finally drove back to Lenox. I didn't tell anyone. I just showed up at the estate, parked in the driveway, and sat there staring at the door. The house hadn't changed. Still imposing. Still the kind of place where silence echoed louder than sound. I walked in. The staff barely reacted. I guess they're used to ghosts walking through the halls. Roseanne was in the conservatory, pruning a poinsettia. She looked up, mildly startled. "Oh," she said. Not hello. Not Delia. Just oh. I didn't waste time. "You knew I wasn't yours." She paused. Her hand hovering midair like she was conducting silence. Yes. That was it. One word. No apology. No warmth. No explanation. "You raised me like I was defective," I said. She looked at me, unblinking. "You were never meant to be here." The words hit harder than any slap could have. But in that moment, I felt nothing. Not rage. Not even sadness. Just clarity. She had always resented me. I used to think she loved me in her own way. Turns out, she didn't love me at all. I left before I could say anything else. My father wasn't home. I thought maybe that was for the best. The next day, he called. "Roseanne told me you stopped by." I didn't respond. "I'm not going to justify what happened," he continued. "What I did. But I want you to understand." I finally said something. "Understand what?" "That you abandoned Eleanor and then recycled her child into your trophy family?" He sighed. "That's not fair." I snapped. "You left her. You let her raise me alone until she died. And then you erased her." He went quiet. "Then, I didn't want to lose everything." "You did. You just didn't realize it." And then I hung up. After that, it got quiet again. Mirabelle stopped texting. Jasper stopped calling. Roseanne, well, she was never really there to begin with. I thought maybe that was the end of it. The truth was out. My identity unwrapped like some cruel holiday present. I started researching Eleanor's life. Where she lived. Her artwork. I even found a local gallery in Provincetown that held some of her paintings in storage. One of the staff members remembered her. "She was wild," he said. "But warm. Like she could see through you." I cried in the parking lot. That night, I started painting for the first time in years. I wasn't good. But it felt like breathing. It felt like I was connecting to a version of myself I had never been allowed to be. I kept the smaller mirror, the clean one that came with the box, on my desk. I kept the one from Christmas too, the one with failure still faintly visible under the cracks. Every time I looked at them side by side, I felt like I was in between. Between Delia Walsh, the woman they tried to write, and Eleanor Rhodes Jr., the woman who's finally writing herself. I started spending a few hours every week in the library. The public one in Worcester, not far from my apartment. I told myself I was just researching Eleanor, but in reality, I think I was looking for something else, a sense of lineage, a thread. Something to anchor me. I learned she'd gone to Bennington College. Studied fine arts and literature. She wrote poetry that was never published, sketched on napkins, walls, the backs of bills. Most of her work didn't survive the years, but there were mentions of her in local papers, art shows, charity events, one protest in the early 80s against a factory that was dumping runoff into the Mill River. She sounded like someone I would have wanted to know. The irony hit me like a punch in the chest. I did know her. For 4 years. She was my mother. I just didn't remember. I had the DMV photo they used in her obituary, black and white, grainy. I started carrying it in my bag. I didn't know why. Maybe because no one else had ever carried her with them. I reached out to someone who had known her, a woman named Brenda Caro, who was listed as an emergency contact on some old records I found at the city archives. Brenda ran a bookstore in Provincetown called The Violet Hour. She answered on the second ring. Her voice was sandpaper and warmth. "Eleanor's girl?" she asked when I introduced myself. I didn't know what to say, so I just said yes. She was quiet for a long time. Then, "I never thought I'd hear from you." Brenda invited me out. Said she'd be happy to talk. No pressure. Just bring myself. So the following weekend, I packed a bag and drove to Provincetown. It was cold, gray, but beautiful in that coastal New England kind of way, moody skies, salt-worn shingles, small bakeries on corners that looked like they hadn't changed since the 1950s. I met Brenda in the bookstore after closing hours. She looked to be in her late 70s, wearing 3 scarves and the kind of glasses that made her look perpetually unimpressed. "You have Eleanor's eyes," she said, then corrected herself. Her real eyes. Not the cautious ones she wore later. We sat in the back, drank tea that tasted like licorice and bark, and she told me about my mother. She loved so loudly, it scared people, Brenda said. She wasn't made for the world your father came from. It dulled her. Tried to. But she never lost her colors. She showed me a few pieces of Eleanor's artwork stored in the back. One was a mixed media collage titled Inheritance. It was made up of torn pages from philosophy books, bits of lace, cigarette ash, and a photo of a baby, my baby picture. It was framed with broken mirror shards around the edge. I couldn't speak. I just stared at it, realizing for the first time that I was part of someone's art. Someone's grief. Someone's everything. She wanted you to be more than the legacy, Brenda said. She just didn't know how to protect you from it. I stayed for hours. Brenda gave me the collage. "She made this for you," she said. She never gave it to anyone else. I cried in my car for an hour after I left. When I got back home, I hung the collage in my hallway. It felt strange, having a piece of my mother in the house, not the woman who raised me, but the woman who created me. I started thinking of Eleanor less as a tragic figure and more as a real person. Not perfect, but real. I kept waiting for someone from my family to show up at my door. No one did. Jasper messaged again in February. "Delia, Dad's not doing well. Can we talk?" I stared at it for a long time before responding. "Why?" He called right away. "I think you should come see him," he said. He's been, not himself. Did he ever tell the truth? I asked. No, Jasper admitted. But I think he wants to now. I agreed to meet. Not because I wanted closure, I don't think that exists. But maybe because part of me still wanted something that looked like acknowledgement. Or maybe I was just tired of carrying silence. When I arrived at the house, the air felt different. The staff looked at me with something I hadn't seen before, not pity. Maybe caution. Or awareness. Like they knew. My father was in his study, seated in a leather chair near the fireplace. He looked older than I remembered. Smaller. He didn't stand when I entered. "Delia," he said. "Or, is it Eleanor now? You don't get to decide that." He nodded. "Fair." We sat in silence for a while. The fire cracked. The same shelves of books towered around us. I remembered being 7, trying to read Kafka to impress him. He told me then, "You'll never be able to get it until you've failed at something big." He was wrong. I got it now. I just didn't fail. He spoke first. "I kept the letters because I couldn't destroy them. But I also couldn't read them. Every time I looked at that box, it reminded me I didn't deserve forgiveness." "You don't," I said. Calmly. Not cruelly. He nodded. "I know." More silence. Then, I didn't love Roseanne. Not the way I loved Eleanor. But I was afraid of losing everything. And I thought, if I raised you right, maybe that would make up for it. I laughed, bitter. "You didn't raise me. You manipulated me. You let her shape me into something you could live with." "She wanted nothing to do with you," he said. "After Eleanor died. She said it was your punishment for existing. I let her believe she was in control. But I kept you because I owed Eleanor that much." That hit differently. It didn't feel like love. It felt like guilt dressed as obligation. I stood up. "You didn't keep me for her. You kept me for you. So you could sleep at night." He didn't deny it. I left without saying goodbye. Outside, I texted Brenda, "You were right. She never lost her colors. He just painted over them." I spent the drive home in silence. That night, I lit a candle and sat with the letters again. Not for answers. Just to hear her voice. Just to let her speak, finally, without being interrupted by history. And for the first time, I felt like someone was listening to me, too. February passed slowly. I didn't do much outside the necessary. I taught 2 online classes at the local community college, literature and creative writing. The students were mostly adults returning to school, many older than me. They asked thoughtful questions. They weren't trying to impress anyone. Just trying to understand. That felt healing in a way nothing else had. I started including pieces of Eleanor's letters in my lesson plans. Not directly, of course, but her voice, the way she expressed love and rage and regret with the same kind of fire, it crept into the materials. One day, we discussed the idea of invisible legacies, the emotional fingerprints we leave on people who may never even know our names. I had to step out halfway through the session. Something in my chest gave out. Grief, I think. But not for Eleanor. For the life I might have had if I'd known her. If I'd had even 5 more years with her. A week later, Brenda sent me a package. No note. Just a wrapped bundle of notebooks. They were Eleanor's journals. 3 of them, tied with silk ribbon and wrapped in linen. I opened the first one slowly, like it might bite me. Inside were sketches, some finished, some just pencil ghosts, of people, landscapes, abstract shapes that pulsed with something unspoken. And then the writing began. She talked about my father. She hated him, but loved him too. Or maybe, as she put it, I loved the way I thought he might have loved me. There was a softness in her entries after I was born, pages and pages of motherhood, fear, wonder, exhaustion, joy. Some lines read like prayers. Others like confessions. March 3, 1987, she looks at me like I'm the only truth that's ever existed. I am terrified I won't be enough to hold her. May 12, 1989, I watched her sleep with her hand curled under her cheek, just like Eldrick used to do. It gutted me. I want to forget him. But then she says mama, and I remember that love and pain are not opposites. They're twins. I couldn't stop reading. I was so hungry to know her. To be known by her. I started thinking about changing my name. Not legally, not yet, but emotionally. Internally. It felt strange to say it out loud. Eleanor. But when I did, alone in my apartment, it didn't feel forced. It felt like I'd dropped a weight I didn't know I was carrying. One night, I stood in front of both mirrors. The broken one from Christmas, still leaning in the back of my closet, a faint red failure still bleeding through the cracks, and the clean one from the box. I said my name out loud. Not Delia. Eleanor Rhodes. I didn't cry. Not then. But I did sleep through the night for the first time in weeks. By March, I was spending every other weekend in Provincetown. Brenda let me help out in the bookstore. She said it was good for my soul. I think she knew that connecting to Eleanor's world, to her town, her people, her rhythms, was rewiring me in ways therapy couldn't reach. I learned that Eleanor had been well known in the local art community. Not famous, but beloved. She was the kind of person people remembered even after 30 years. She'd dance barefoot in the square after too many espressos, one woman told me. Then cry over the sunset like it was the last one she'd ever see. They spoke about her like she was mythic and fragile at the same time. No one had known about me. Or if they had, they never said so. Brenda admitted she thought Eleanor had placed me for adoption. She never knew I'd been taken in by Eldrick and Roseanne. She never spoke of it, Brenda said. Only that she lost you. I thought she meant by choice. I didn't know how to respond to that. I still don't. One afternoon, I found an old answering machine tape at the bottom of the last journal. I almost didn't play it. I wasn't sure I could handle hearing her voice. But eventually, I found an adapter online and hooked it up to a borrowed cassette player. There were 3 messages. All from the same day, the day before she died. The first was static heavy, her voice soft but shaking. Eldrick. I don't know if this number still works. I just wanted you to know she's okay. She's strong. You should see how she draws, how she tells stories. She's got your stubborn streak too. I thought you should know. The second message was longer. She sounded tired. I keep thinking I should just let it go. But some nights, I look at her and I think, she's going to want to know where she came from. Even if it's ugly. Even if it hurts. She deserves that. The third one. I still can't describe. Please, just promise me you'll keep her safe. Even if it's not with me. I don't want her to be erased. I sat there, the tape clicking to a stop, and I realized, he hadn't kept me safe. He had hidden me. Smothered every part of her that might have lived in me. Turned me into a version of myself that fit his world. But not mine. And yet, I was still here. Still her daughter. Still whole. I haven't fully decided what to do next. I know I'm not going back to the family estate again. That chapter feels sealed. But I also don't know what reconciliation looks like, or if it's even necessary. Sometimes, healing isn't about making peace with others. It's about making peace with the fact that some people will never say they're sorry. And still choosing to live fully. I think Eleanor would want that. But I'm not there yet. April came with a sharp shift in the air. That kind of spring wind that makes everything feel urgent. Like the world is waking up and asking you, now what? I had already been living in the middle, between Eleanor's world and the one Eldrick forced me into, for too long. It was time to choose. I went to the courthouse in Barnstable County. Took a deep breath. Filled out the paperwork. My hands didn't even shake. Name change petition filed, Delia Walsh Eleanor Rhodes. It took a month to finalize. But when it did, I felt it in my bones. Not because the name itself mattered, but because I chose it. I claimed it. For her. For me. It wasn't about rejecting my old life. It was about reclaiming the one they tried to erase. During that time, I kept thinking about justice. What it looks like when the people who hurt you are untouchable. When they have lawyers and money and reputations they built like bunkers around themselves. I didn't want to destroy anyone. I didn't want wrongdoing. I just wanted truth. And maybe, just maybe, a little poetic rebalancing. So I started writing. At first, it was just journaling. Then memories. Then scenes. Then letters. Eventually, it turned into a memoir, part creative nonfiction, part autobiography, part tribute. I called it The Mirror Was Never Mine. I didn't name names, not directly. But anyone who knew the Walsh family would know. The pharmaceutical empire. The matriarch's obsession with appearances. The mirror on Christmas morning. The secrets behind closed doors. I didn't write it for revenge. I wrote it for the girl in the photo, the one with the dandelion in her hand, who never had a chance to know her mother. I wrote it for women who've been rewritten, renamed, rebranded by people who thought their version of you was better than your own. I sent the manuscript to 3 small publishers and 1 indie press out of Boston. Within 6 weeks, I had 2 offers. I picked the one that didn't ask me to tone it down. The book came out the following fall. It didn't blow up overnight, but it gained traction. First on Book Talk. Then Reddit. Then NPR picked it up for a segment on generational trauma and hidden adoptions. People started connecting the dots. I never gave interviews. I never named Aldrich, Roseanne, or Jasper. I didn't have to. Their silence did all the confirming. I was at Brenda's store the first time it made the Boston Globe. Mirror Memoir Rocks New England's Wealthiest Family, the headline read. I laughed for a full minute. Brenda poured champagne into mismatched mugs. You didn't burn them down, she said. You held up a mirror and let them light the match themselves. Jasper called a week later. You wrote about us, he said. I wrote about me. You humiliated the family. No, I said. You did that all by yourself. He hung up. Roseanne sent a letter. Not to apologize. Just a cease and desist, wrapped in full legal language. My publisher sent back a short response that ended with a single sentence. Please review the definitions of fiction and fair use. Aldrich never reached out. I heard through Brenda that he'd stepped back from the company. Too much unwanted attention. The mirror had cracked wide open. And everyone saw themselves. I didn't stop there. I took some of the royalties and bought the property Eleanor had once rented in Provincetown, the small, sun-drenched cottage near the dunes. It had been converted to a rental, but the owner was retiring. I made an offer above asking. She cried when I told her who I was. Eleanor would have wanted you here, she said. This was always her place. I turned the cottage into an artist's residency for women. 1-year programs for women over 40 who were starting over. Who needed space to find their voice again. I called it the Yellow Room, after the sundress Eleanor wore in that photo. It's been 2 years now. My book's in its 4th printing. I teach creative writing part-time at a small liberal arts college down the Cape. I walk on the beach in the mornings. Paint badly in the afternoons. I've even started seeing someone who knows my story, all of it, and never once asked me to shrink it. And that broken mirror? Still in my closet. Covered now in wildflowers and glued on seashells. The word failure still faint, buried under layers of Eleanor's favorite colors, violet, ochre, sea green. A reminder. Not of who they said I was. But of who I decided to be.